Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the Artish Podcast, where we talk about art and other things too. I'm Poprollarts, the host of this podcast, and if you're interested in checking me or my artwork out, feel free to click the links below. So lately, there have been times where I feel like there's absolutely nothing for me to do. When that happens, I just lay on my bed, sit up, and I start looking around my entire room. It's kind of like meditation in a way, where instead of closing my eyes, I'm appreciating and having a nostalgic connection with the things that I notice. It's therapeutic for me in a way. Some of the things I notice are like the candle I bought on a trip with my friend, or a stuffed animal I still care for sitting on a shelf. Sometimes I'm just staring at my shelves or the little art corner that I've developed over the years for some inspiration. But recently, I noticed something interesting. All artists seem to have a hoard of sketchbooks somewhere, and I'm no exception. Some of them are hidden in plain sight, while others are just laying on the floor or a desk somewhere. Whether they're new or currently being used, and some of them are complete, all artists seem to have them. They even range in various sizes. I'm always watching artists on YouTube, and they all have a collection of sketchbooks somewhere. But why is that? And what is a sketchbook, and why do artists use them? If I had to explain a sketchbook in simple terms, I would say think of a diary. It's a place where you can go to write down literally anything that's on your mind. You could take your time and think about what content to put into it, or sometimes it's literally just a brain dump where you write anything. Whether it's what happened throughout your day or an idea you just had, well, that's how I see a sketchbook anyways. As you complete your diary, you are able to see your progress as time goes on, or how things changed as time passed. It's like a history record in a sense. Similarly, instead of using words, a sketchbook uses drawings or sketches to convey an artist's progress over time. It's a place where artists can practice new mediums or form their rough ideas. It can be used for anything an artist really desires. Like right now, I'm personally practicing hand anatomy, so I just have lots of pages filled with hands in various poses. Some artists even draw complete artworks in their sketchbooks, and I've done it a couple times, but not as often as some people do. Believe it or not, a lot of artists actually struggle with using a sketchbook. They struggle with the idea of having imperfections, aka having things in their sketchbook that aren't up to their standards. Because as artists, we set high expectations for ourselves. Like every drawing or every painting we do has to be this standard or this perfect in order for me to actually be proud of it or consider it good enough for other people to even view. But because we place such high standards on ourselves, we think we shouldn't have anything that doesn't meet those standards, anything that is below that level, or something that is completely quote unquote ugly. As artists, we have to learn that some art can be okay, and it doesn't have to meet these standards, and that we shouldn't be placing such high expectations on things that are our rough drafts or rough items. Like as artists, we shouldn't be putting such high expectations on ourselves to produce great art all the time. And it's something that we still have to learn, and personally, I also still struggle with. Keep in mind that these sketchbooks are made for our imperfections. It's made to hold our rough sketches and our ideas that we still haven't quite developed yet. And it's okay if these ideas aren't in full fruition and that they're just still ideas. A lot of artists I actually watch on YouTube cover up these imperfections using paper, drawing over the sketch, or just covering it up with tape to hide these imperfections and things they don't really want to see. But just like a diary, a sketchbook has the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it may be true that these sketches are ugly or imperfect, but you have to be okay with messing up in your sketchbook. Messing up shows progress, and it lets you look at the past and see things that you could improve on or change. It lets you observe and see what you could do differently in the future. And that's the magic of sketching in a sketchbook. Something that I thought would be interesting to mention is that artists aren't the only one who uses sketchbooks or sketches in general. Some of these individuals are like architects who draw rough blueprints of buildings. My friend Caleb, who is a fashion designer, uses sketchbooks to draw clothing designs, while my friend Jay uses sketches to draw diagrams in his notebook of the human body. So there are many uses for sketches and using a sketchbook in general. In In most arts and crafts stores like Michael's or Blick, there is a huge selection of sketchbooks that artists can choose from, and they range in different colors and sizes, even types of paper within the sketchbook. So how do artists choose what sketchbook is right for them? I would say that picking the right sketchbook for you is all dependent on the individual person. For example, let's say the main medium that you use is watercolor. So you might want to find a sketchbook that has paper that can withstand the watercolor properties, like hot press paper or cold press paper. But for a person who's a mixed media artist, they might have to have paper that can withstand all mediums like charcoal, pastels, pencil, acrylic paints, and so on and so forth. I personally prefer to have paper that can withstand mixed media because I'm an artist who works with various types of mediums. So when I enter stores like Michael's or Blick, I go to the sketchbook section and I am looking for sketchbooks that say multimedia or mixed media on them. I have 3 sketchbooks that I personally use at the moment. They vary in different sizes as well as the types of paper that are within these sketchbooks. And some of them I had to find out the hard way. For example, my travel sketchbook by Artist Loft is a 4x4 sketchbook, but the paper doesn't have the qualities that can withstand watercolor. So when I decided to put watercolor into this sketchbook, it kind of didn't dry and was wet and stained everything, and it was not pretty. A note to self never to use watercolor in this particular sketchbook. At least not lots of it anyway. But the reason why I love this 4x4 sketchbook compared to my other sketchbooks is because how convenient it is to travel with. I can literally pull it out on a train or if I'm walking outside and just doodle what I see around me. And I love the convenience of that. This 4x4 sketchbook is different from my other 2 sketchbooks because my other 2 sketchbooks are bigger in size and I use them for that purpose. For example, my one that is like a notebook size, I usually store in my backpack and I pull it out if I'm at a cafe or I'm hanging out, but not really something that I take everywhere with me, only on some occasions. The sketchbook that I have that's even larger than that one, I use when I want to sketch large scale things or I want more paper to be able to practice a particular method or drawing. For example, for hands, I would fill up the whole page with hand, and I can fill up that page more than I would be able to on a 4x4 page, enabling me to have more space for practice. Even though most artists have a sketchbook somewhere, we find the blank page of a sketchbook to be a little intimidating. You're probably thinking, what's intimidating about that? Well, it's the pressure to fill the page up with something, anything, especially when you have no inspiration or motivation of what to do in it. At its worst, this can become artist block. Similar to writer's block, when writers are unable to write or create anything, artists are unable to create. Your head goes blank and you don't have any ideas waiting to sprawl out of you. You just aren't motivated or inspired. So how do we as artists gain motivation? I have a couple of tips and tricks that I personally use when I'm lacking in motivation that I'm hoping would be able to help you all too. But before I get into these tips, I just want to mention a couple of YouTubers that have their own tips on how to stay motivated. YouTubers like Ethan Becker, Mark Brunette, and Casey Golden. My first tip for you all is to not make art for the likes/popularity. And I get it. When people like your work and comment on it, it makes you feel great as an artist, but don't make it your main focus. Do art for yourself once in a while and don't think about the popularity it consumes. For example, a lot of artists who do art and make them into products only create things that will sell well versus what they personally want to do. And here's the thing, you don't have to post it at all. It can just be for you. You can keep it to yourself and it could be anything that isn't just limited to fan art, unless you personally like to do fan art. But keep in mind that every art that you produce doesn't have to be a masterpiece, and it's okay if incomplete things exist in your sketchbook or in general. I just think it's funny that our mind tends to occupy the incomplete artworks rather than the complete artworks. It's continuously on our mind. It might be just because we think it's imperfect, not as good as our other works, or incomplete, but we have to learn to be okay with these incomplete things because not everything can be perfect or exactly the way we want it or envision it. Now here's my second tip, and that is to compare yourself to other artists. Just keep in mind that there are healthy ways ways to compare yourself to other artists as well as unhealthy ways. For example, if there's an artist that you really like that draws hands really well and your hands don't look like their hands, you can make it a goal to practice enough in order to one day reach the type of hands that this artist you admire draws. But don't think, oh, I'm not good enough, so this is why my hands don't look like this. Or I'll never be as great as an artist as this person. Artists vary and they all have different skills levels, different years of experience, so you can't really fairly compare yourself to them. You might personally also have a different art style, so trying to compare your art style to another person's art style wouldn't make sense. Basically, don't put yourself down when you're comparing yourself to other people, because what you're working on is still progress. You will eventually reach that high mighty stage of being the artist that you dream of, but it does take time and practice. Now, my third tip for you all is to take breaks, because honestly, sometimes I don't even want to do art too, and that's okay. If we do art all the time, we eventually get burnt out. So sometimes it's good just to take a breather and finding motivation in the things we do every day, like going on a walk and touching some grass, or hanging out with friends and family, and that becomes your motivation. Taking a break can help you find inspiration art-wise. Just from doing everyday things or seeing everyday things, you can feel or be inspired. There was a comment that I found under a YouTube video that said that real-world problems could affect the way that you're motivated or inspired to do art. So people should think about what problems in their life are making them not do things, and find ways and time to manage and solve these problems, and eventually the motivation and inspiration will come back to you because you are more freely able to think without all these issues on your mind. This gives you more room to allow yourself to find inspiration and motivation to do art. Now, my last tip for you all is to just get started. Get a pen, pencil, whatever, and just start drawing anything, even if it's just a scribble on a piece of paper. Don't even think about the finished product or the big picture. Just think small. That way you don't have to pressure yourself to finish a painting or drawing, and you could freely think about how to progress, allowing yourself just to be inspired by your strokes and movement on the page. And that's all the tips I have to help you guys find motivation and inspiration and to get you guys out of your artist block. Something that I thought would be interesting to mention on the podcast is that art is becoming more accessible, meaning that anyone can become an artist with practice. And by more accessible, I mean the ability to get supplies as well as the format. So digital drawing has become very popular as of recently. One of the things that I noticed recently is that Dollar Tree has created a dedicated arts and crafts section, selling things from acrylic paints to canvases to other crafts. So literally anyone can start being an artist for $1. Well, $1.25 now. I've mentioned in the previous podcast episode that I've been trying to find more artist opportunities within the area that I live in. I've been trying to apply for more internships related to either the arts or communications fields because although I'm a graduate, I don't have much experience outside of college. Unfortunately, for a lot of the communication opportunities I found, it requires me to have a recommendation letter or still be in college. Actually, I was so focused on finding communications opportunities, I completely forgot to find opportunities within the arts. Today, I actually found the opportunity within the arts to work on mural paintings throughout the city. I recently applied for their 2023 summer internship, so we'll hope it goes well, but they require me to show them my resume, a statement of interest, and a portfolio that had 8 of my paintings or images, as long as their title, description, size, the medium that I used, and the year that I made it. It took me a while to actually find out all the information. I had to go to my basement and measure out the paintings that I've done and figure out what year I actually made them because I don't date my pieces. Organizing the images with the descriptions and all that was very difficult to do on a Google Doc paper, but I ended up doing it and formatting it into PDF. Now all I have to do is wait for the results and hopefully they're good ones. In other good news, I actually got accepted into a volunteer opportunity for writing, where I'll help them write feature articles about their organization and their projects that they are doing. Like I mentioned in the other podcast episode, this podcast will consist of me doing some type of art and then voice overing it with this podcast. In this particular episode, I'm working on a pet portrait for the Animal Rescue League of Berks County 2022 Pet Portrait event. I actually found this opportunity when I was looking for volunteer opportunities for artists near me. At the time, I was in college in the Berks County area, so it was perfect timing. I even got one of my friends to participate one of the years too. So far, I've been participating in this event for 2 years now, and I try to do it every year if I have the time. Pet owners donate a certain amount of money and we make portraits of their pets. That's pretty much it. Each artist gets assigned a pet through email and has to mail the piece to their organization before a certain date. All of the artists who participate are volunteers, and it could be anyone from kid to adult volunteering. Artists can use any medium as long as it's on some sort of paper or canvas. I've seen people do digital works as well, but now that I think about it, I haven't seen anyone make sculptures of pets. I figured it'd be more difficult to mail too. Most of the pets are typically your average furry pets like cats or dogs, but I've seen a few lizards and hamsters here and there. They haven't opened volunteer opportunities for their 2023 pet portrait event yet, but I'll link their information below for those who are interested in participating or donating to get their own pet portrait when it's available. Something that you might not know about me is that I own pets too. I've had my pet Turdy for around 8 years now. She's a turtle, and I recently got a cat from outside my house. She was a stray and I let her into my home and she stayed ever since. Her name is Lucky. My mom named her Lucky because she told me that she was lucky that she was letting her stay in this house. We also have some fish, and I did take care of a newborn kitty who got abandoned by his mother, but unfortunately he passed away. His name was Money. So I'm thinking when the pet portrait event for 2023 comes out that I'll be getting some pet portraits done of my pets as well. For the 2022 pet portrait event, I actually received the image of a dog and her name was Maggie. I decided to use acrylic paints for my medium, and I used a 10x8 canvas that I got from Michael's. Of course, from their clearance section. Funnily enough, I also have a cousin named Maggie, and she has her own YouTube channel as well that I'll link below if you're interested in checking her out. The funniest thing is, although the pet is the main subject, I was totally avoiding painting it. I actually drew out a sketch of the pet based off of the photo before I started painting, as well as the background, and I've just painted the background. I even colored the dog's bandana. But eventually, I was brave enough to actually paint the actual dog. I think I was intimidated because the dog had lots of shades of the one color, and I find it difficult to see color sometimes and the difference, especially if the hues are similar, like yellow, light yellow, dark yellow. I don't know why, sometimes it's just hard for me to actually differentiate these colors. But eventually, I get started on the dog, and it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. Sometimes, if you're scared and you gotta face your fears, you can try to overcome it, and eventually it's not that bad. That's why sometimes when I see a blank piece of paper, I'm like, just draw something. Don't be scared of the blank page. I ended up finishing the piece, but it took me about 3 days, and I was doing it in my living room / dining room area. I found it a little bit embarrassing because my mom or my dad or my brother would pass by me while I was just painting, and I was just like, leave me alone, don't look, it's not finished yet. That's how I feel about a lot of incomplete works. I don't want people to look at it, and I want to hide it from the entire world, at least until it's finished. Speaking of incomplete works, there are several projects that I'm working on now as an artist, and I wanted to tell you guys what I've been working on lately so that you can have some companionship in your own artwork. So in my sketchbook, I remember being inspired by some YouTubers who made fairy houses out of clay and placed them in their local park or walking trail. It allowed for the everyday people who were taking a walk with their kids or just passing by to have an otherworldly experience right in their local yards. I drew a couple of sketches of fairy houses that I thought would be interesting to make, like a little mushroom house, a boot house, and a small cabin, and more. I've just had so much ideas because of the fantasy aspect where you can literally make anything up and it could be real. I started working on the mushroom house. So far, I completed the base and overall structure of the house as well as a little window, but I am still missing the mushroom top. And the reason why is because I ran out of air dry clay. But then I thought, why don't I just make my own clay? Around the time that I was thinking about making my own clay, I happened to be helping my mom shred her paid bills that she had stored away since 2013. It ended up being a lot of paper, and I was sitting there for a couple of hours just shredding away, and I remembered something. There was this YouTuber by the name of Red Ted Art who used shredded pieces of paper to make handmade clay. So of course, I search it up and start making handmade clay because, air dry clay is kind of expensive. I also recently found out that there's a way to make clay out of dirt, but I definitely need to research that more before I give it a try. Actually, I used to take a ceramic class in high school. Instead of using clays like polymer clay or air dry clay, we actually use this red clay that could be reused and recycled to make new clays too, especially if we ran out or there was a piece that got destroyed that we didn't need. From that ceramics class, I learned how to make bowls using my hands. Pinch pot is what they call them. I also learned how to make things like cups and this huge vase that I actually never picked up from high school, and I don't think they have it now. Something that I recently found that was interesting is that Crayola makes air dry clay for terracotta clay. So it's red clay, but it's air dryable. So basically, to sum it up, I have experience with clay. I was also inspired to do something similar to fairy houses because of a YouTuber named Where the Gnomes Live, and she makes lots of miniatures like doll houses and figures out of masking tape, clay, glue, and aluminum foil, and I thought it would be something that I would be able to do too. I just love how whimsical her pieces look. So yeah, Red Ted Art's tutorial on how to make clay out of paper involves getting shredded pieces of paper and soaking it in hot water overnight. Then the next day you can pulp it up with a blender and then add flour to it and salt in order to preserve the clay for longer and put it in the fridge. It seems simple. So I followed the process. I got shredded pieces of paper from the bills I was shredding and soaked it in hot water overnight. Unfortunately, I didn't have a plumb tool, but I was told I could just break up the pieces of paper with my hands to make it pulpy, and it should still work fine according to a comment. So recently I tried to do the fairy house again. This time I decided to use aluminum foil and cover it with the clay that I made. Unfortunately, my clay wasn't pulpy enough. There were still clumps of paper here and there, and overall it did not work. I put it over the aluminum foil base and let it sit out all day, and the clay never dried. So that was a fail, but next time I'll probably get a machine or a blender or something so that I'm able to pulp the paper more, make it more effective and clump together easily. Little does my mom know, I actually bought her a hand blender / mixer for Mother's Day, so I should have that soon as well. I mentioned before that I've been practicing digital art a lot more lately. There are actually a lot of benefits that digital arts offer. 1, you don't have to waste paper. 2, you'll never run out of art supplies. And 3, it makes it more convenient to create more art more easily. I'd like to consider myself more of a traditional artist who uses mediums like acrylic paints or watercolor, but lately it feels like a lot of art can become digitalized, and it kind of scares me. I don't know if it's a good or bad thing. In my opinion, it's definitely more convenient and gives artists more accessibilities that aren't just limited to the traditional arts. But I get scared of technology becoming so advanced. The fact that digital brushes are able to do textures and implement things that can usually be done traditionally shows how advanced technology has become. Things like AI art, but I won't be getting into that in this podcast episode. The reason why I started practicing digital art in the first place is because around 2 years ago, one of my brother's friends who was an animator was offering me his Wacom tablet for around $50. I thought it was a steal because there were drawing tablets more expensive than that one. It's one of the tablets that doesn't have a screen on it, which is the only thing I found difficult to adjust to. I'm so used to having pen or pencil or paper just in front of me and not on a separate screen with my drawing supplies on a different tablet. Because of this, it required me to practice hand coordination so that I can accurately do drawings on my laptop. I recently quit my job working at an arcade in the food and beverage section, so I have more free time to practice artwork. And a thing I really wanted to work on is improving my digital art. Because I'm so used to using pen and paper physically, it just felt weird to adjust to the drawing tablet, especially when the screen and the tablet are on different devices. I recently got Procreate for around $10, which for a drawing software is pretty good pricing. It's also just a one-time purchase, so no monthly subscription or anything like that. It still might be an expensive option for some people because you do need an iPad and an Apple Pencil in order to draw on it. And the Apple Pencil total goes to $100, while an iPad starts at $600 and up. The reason why I got Procreate is because a lot of artists I watch on YouTube actually use it as their main program for designing art, whether it's stickers, prints, or even memo pads. There is actually great tutorials created by the Procreate creators themselves that teach people all about Procreate and its functions. It's called the Procreate Beginner Series, and it's run by Christian, where they teach you the fundamentals of Procreate while teaching you how to create something implementing all of those fundamentals. So far, I did up to part 2 of the series, in which I made 2 landscapes. In addition to these tutorials, I also found some tutorials by Genevieve's Design Studio, and she has a lot of them on her YouTube channel. I particularly did the one that said how to draw cartoon faces plus adding textures to illustration. Just a reminder, if you're listening to this podcast on YouTube, I'll be linking everyone I mentioned in this podcast episode below. When I'm using my drawing tablet because it's a USB plugin, I'm usually on my laptop, and the drawing software that I use is called Krita. It is a free downloadable software, and in my opinion, it's very similar to Photoshop, and it's great as a free alternative compared to Clip Studio Paint and other drawing softwares. Before I got Krita, I was using a webpage called Sketch.io that had limited functionality, but it worked for what I was going for. I made several pieces on there, and one of the ones I'm most proud of is when I made a textured cat lying in the field of grass. I was inspired to draw this because one day I went to a field near my house with a friend, and we found a dead cat in the middle of the field, and I wondered if the cat chose that place to die so that everyone would be able to see it. It felt like that was the message the cat was trying to send, or at least that's what I thought anyway. Since I started practicing digital art, there are several projects that I've tried to make. I wouldn't call them successful, but I think it was good for the practice I was using them for. For example, I drew a figure of Gojo from Jujutsu Kaisen in chibi form to practice line art and shading. As I'm also new to the Procreate software, it was helpful to use these pieces to learn how to use the software to begin with. I've been very focused on making art related to the anime, TV show, and movie culture scene. The reason is because one day I want to be able to do an artist alley, and a lot of artist alleys happen in conventions like anime conventions, comic book conventions, and more. So in order for me to one day go to those conventions, I need to start making products or things that I can sell that people might be interested in. Therefore, I'm trying to build up the products that I have / artwork that I have in order to one day maybe sell them at a convention. There are a lot of dreams people have, whether they're younger or older. In my opinion, dreams are goals that people hope to achieve one day, but it just feels so out of reach. Growing up, I thought I would become a doctor due to the Asian stereotypes families place on their children. I've always wanted to be a veterinarian actually, but the thought of blood and breaking news of death to animals to families broke my heart. I had to deal with death several times because of incidents within my family, so it became something I am afraid of. Now that I'm older, I have new dreams and new goals that I want to achieve throughout my lifetime, which isn't necessarily being a veterinarian or a doctor, but I want to be a full-time artist or in the writing field in some kind of way or capacity. If I do become a full-time artist one day, I would like to have my own little storefront and go to artist alleys and sell my artwork there and whatever other opportunities that may come. So right now I'm creating pieces that I like, but also that will be great for people who love the fandom. That way I'm not just making products that can sell, but products that I actually enjoy making, and that's the best part. Right now, I'm working on a digital art piece in Krita where I am doing a Chainsaw Man fan art. And Chainsaw Man is an anime, for those of you who don't know, / manga, that got recently adapted into an anime. But I wanted to draw Aki, Power, and Denji together, as they're one of my favorite dynamics in the Chainsaw Man series, and they give such roomies and friend vibes. I don't know, I just thought it'd be cute to do. I've done it once, but the style wasn't exactly the way I would prefer it to be. As I've said before in the previous podcast, I find it difficult to capture the anime-esque style, and it's not something I'm used to drawing myself. Everything I draw ends up turning out too realistic and not the cartoony vibe I would like to achieve. But I'm working on it, and I'm going to try to find my own style within the anime-esque style. Other than that, lately I've been really enjoying going out of my house. I'm a bit of an introvert, so honestly I prefer to stay at home pretty much all the time. The only time I usually go out is to watch a movie by myself. Like recently I watched the Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves. But sometimes me and my friends meet up to go on these little study dates. My friends would be practicing Japanese, and I'm usually doing sketches in my travel sketchbook of things I want to practice. We get boba, chat a little, and study, and it's really nice. As of late, my sketchbook consists of me practicing drawing cloaks and hoods because I want to draw D&D characters wearing them. I also practice drawing babies because they're usually a topic I don't draw, so I got a decent amount of practice that day. We're actually planning another study date this Thursday, so I'm really excited and looking forward to that. But for now, this is the end of this podcast episode, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about art and other things too. I hope your day is going well, and feel free to subscribe and follow this podcast if you want to see more. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.